Welcome, Color of Success podcast family. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Check out my memoir, Cancel the Filter, Realities of a Psychologist, Podcaster, and Working Mother of Color, where I share my experiences in the realm of mental health, both professionally and personally. Color of Success podcast is streaming on all your favorite platforms and socials. Whether you're on the go or comfy on the sofa, you can tune in at your own comfort. As you know, we love growing discussions with our guests from our AAPI and ethnic minority communities. With so many friends and experts from different aspects of life, we love learning their stories and understanding what their success means to them. Let's get into it. Shauntel Murphy began her career in corporate America as an executive assistant, and her role gradually transformed her into a safe harbor for the executive, serving as a thought partner and cultural representative. She became a bridge between frontline staff and C-suite leaders, witnessing both successful and ineffective leadership styles. This experience helped her realize the importance of culturally intelligent leadership and fostering an environment where team members feel comfortable expressing their authentic voices. Shauntel's company, Wishing You Well in Life, is a valuable asset to society and is committed to giving back to the community, organizations, and teams. The goal is to encourage leaders to reevaluate their approach to prevent burnout and work fatigue for themselves and their team members. Well, Shauntel, thank you so much for joining me today. I have some hot questions for you, and I'm so excited to dive into these.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. You look fabulous, by the way.
Oh, you look amazing. I love your background, the whole style, like everything is amazing.
Thank you so much.
So I wanted to start with, can you tell me a little bit about your experiences that led you to your current role?
Yes, my experience in corporate America has been very lengthy and long. It seems like every position that I started off in, it seems like on paper, I was the ideal candidate. But once I got into the workforce, I only had a couple of seconds to gain my rapport within my teammates. Some of my colleagues are like, is that who's going to be here? And they may have thought I was somebody else. And so I've always had to prove myself. And by me proving myself, I've been able to be an ambassador, an ally, and an advocate for others who look like me. I've been able to climb up the ropes of corporate America, and it's brought me to this space here where now my business is a gem back to the economy, where I can be able to educate executives and entrepreneurs and giving them a little bit more of sensitivity on how it is coming into the climate and have a little bit more insight to what it's like to really work with your team.
Let's talk about that because we're both stimulus value wise, women of color. We come in, people have perceptions of us. What was your actual experience, your lived experience when coming into these new situations?
Just coming into the situations, it's like I had to work twice as hard. I may have been the first one in the office, but still, sometimes people never really gave me the credit for things that I may have done, some of the ideal that I may have had. So it's always like I always had to work harder and to be more diligent and be mindful of time and be mindful of who's around. And sometimes I would have some executives, they would give me tasks that had nothing to do with what was at hand. It was like they wanted me to take like an algebra test or something. And it's like, this has nothing to do with what we're actually doing right now. So I've always had to fight for the positions that I've had because in theory, they felt like they belonged to somebody else.
And I think one of the challenges that I personally face is like walking the line between kind of my social justice piece of like I'm being treated unfairly, and people sometimes will say, oh, well, people of color are victimizing themselves. But I think you come in with this idea that things don't start off very equitably. And when you see those things happen, it's like, when do I step in? And how am I being perceived if I step in? I mean, I don't know if that was a similar thing for you, but I mean, what experiences have you had with kind of maybe walking the line in that sense?
all the time, walking the line every day. Coming up in San Francisco, you are in a quote unquote melting pot. So
Yes.
working in some situations, you have individuals where they're like, Shauntel, we need your help with this. So with that being said, definitely I would have to advocate for others who look like me or identify on a different type of scale. And working for presidents and CEOs and CFOs who they have a little bit more of a different privilege scheme than we perceive to have. It's like coming with them. I really had to kind of like educate them on some of the things that I was going through so they could look at it through my lens. It's like, if we're partnering together by me being your executive assistant or you being the executive, if we're going to have a partnership, you have to understand what it's like to kind of be perceived as me as well. If I'm your safe harbor, I need for you to be my safe harbor as well too. And some of them were absolutely shocked by some of the things that they were able to witness just through my lens. So I was able to educate them as well. But the thing about it is that when you do walk that line, you have to be mindful and you have to bring things back in real time. They need to see things in real time. You can't say, oh, this happened 2 weeks later or this happened last night. In order for them to really grasp it and get it, you need to tell it to them right then and there. And then kind of be like a sounding board for other people as well.
How have you made it digestible for folks to start that conversation and start to look at their, just to start self-reflecting on their stimulus value and their unconscious biases?
That's a real thing you said, digestible, because sometimes it seems like it wouldn't be digestible. Sometimes I felt like I was like literally like going through like a mental breakdown. Sometimes I felt like, is this even possible? Or, why is this being my challenge of the day? Sometimes it would always be that challenge of the day. But I think that by me really building a collaboration with the executives from day one, not by them just looking at me and the work that I can do, but me just having real honest conversations with them. Me just really just dropping the title factor. A lot of the times when you're in these environments, it's a lot of power dynamics that's involved. And I have been so blessed to have really good managers and really good executives where we're able to put that to the side and just talk to each other like real human beings. And sometimes they'll be able to see through me and maybe they might have a breakthrough on some of their limited beliefs, on some of the things that they thought. And it's always like, well, the last girl that we had here, and it's like, well, I'm not a girl, I'm a woman. And when they say girl, I know that's reflective upon someone who looks like me or someone who they thought was me. So now I'm always trying to break the limited beliefs that they had on somebody who looks like me. And so just kind of working through that every day, cutting off at that brick by brick, layer by layer. And it's not really an easy thing to do. But the thing about it is that when you do have somebody who you can really work with and be honest with, that's the relationships that I did have. And that's what actually makes me great in my role now, is just really being able to talk to people and not really like bringing them to my level, but meeting them where they're at and educating them where they're at. And then we can kind of move forward on that level.
I know some executives and leaders will be listening to this episode. You sound like you've had some very supportive managers, executives that you've worked with. What characteristics or things did they bring to the table to show that, hey, I'm trying to meet you halfway when we're having this conversation, or I'm receptive?
I've had some great ones, but I've had some bad ones too.
We can talk about both.
Right. By me having the bad ones, that's what's really helped me to accept the ones that are really good. And the ones that are good, those are the ones that look at their team and they understand that there are cliques. They understand that there have been people who've only sat in this chair that look one particular way. They are the ones that are like, you know what, I do want to be innovative. I do want to dare to do something different. They are the ones that are saying, you know, let's go with what you have. I trust you. Hey, I'm going to go in with my team. I want you in the room too.
Mm.
hey, we had a great conversation. Now I want you to go in there as me and you to facilitate the meeting on my behalf now. And sometimes when I would go in those meetings, they're like, wait a minute, where's Mike? Are you sure that he wants you to start this meeting without us? And it's like, yeah, I'm sure. Let's go ahead. We've already talked about this. So
Hmm.
they're the ones that really trust me. And we are really able to have those tough conversations behind closed doors so that when we do come out and we do face the team, we're already on the same accord.
I think that you're bringing up a great point about belonging because this DEIB is thrown around a lot. And I'm glad that we're having these conversations more and more. But um, the and part is, what does that actually look like? And you're talking about the trust factor. And I think I've had a similar experience with, one of my bosses that just completely build that trust with the leadership team to say, hey, you can stand in for me in these meetings because you're capable. There's action that's behind that communication. And so, how do you feel that supervisors can build that trust and can build that supportive environment to facilitate DEIB?
I think that what they need to do is they really need to start with looking at their team and learning different aspects from their team. And if you really want to do that, I think that it's really great to have like a diversity day or to have different boxes, suggestion boxes. But the only way that a box is going to work is if you actually make it work. If you are given advice on how to do something, because I remember one time we were working in an environment and someone said that they didn't feel safe in that environment.
Hmm.
And so if they didn't feel safe, then what can we do to make them feel safe? And the person who put that in there, it was anonymous. So in order for us to turn it around, we needed to do something within 3 days before our next team meeting. So it's like, what can we do within these next 3 days? And we started to make a couple of changes within there. And then one of the things that we did think about was that we want to make people feel safe. So let's have it towards where we are able to have time where people are able to talk. Sometimes people weren't allowed to talk. If your name wasn't on the agenda, then you just weren't able to talk. But if we want to have something towards where we're getting safety, and sometimes safety isn't necessarily physical, it's psychological.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a key thing that we really need to work on in terms of understanding that those go hand in hand for sure. Um, so obviously this is a mental health podcast, and I think one thing that folks are really noticing, especially as, COVID continues or we're coming out of the pandemic, really, is that mental health is just so, so important because people felt so disconnected. So how can executives, how can leaders, how can even colleagues create an environment of connection and great mental health when they may be remote or obviously there's diversity?
Right. That's actually a great question. I think that now more than ever, we need to have meaningful and mindful conversations with individuals, not just like, hey, how are you doing? And then just keep going into different things. I think that we need to be a little bit more aware and take a deeper dive. Everyone's so familiar with the term burnout. Oh, I'm burnt out, burnout. But before it gets to burnout, how about we identify it when it's just at a level of work fatigue? Work fatigue is something that will lead to burnout. So, as we're having these conversations, let's dig in a little bit deeper. Let's look behind the scenes on certain things. Some of the executives, they say that they're about work life balance, but they're sending out emails and text messages after 9 p.m. That's not
Right.
balanced. That's not healthy. If you're already going through a lot or a long day, the last thing you want to do is look at your phone and your boss is asking you about something at 9 o'clock at night. For one, they're not promoting the work life balance themselves. And if you're not promoting it, how can you expect your team to promote something that you're not promoting? So I think that it's very important that we executives look at themselves and then foster that and embrace that for themselves. Be more mindful while we are, pre-post COVID pandemic. It is good to allow individuals the time and the flexibility to go outside. Some individuals, they may not believe in, we have to stay at work Monday through Friday. But I think that it's really good for mental health if some individuals are working remote at least once a week. They need that. It's important. I think that we shouldn't just standardize things from 9 to 5. How come someone can't start work at 11?
Hey, this is why we connect. I was like, I don't know how people function. I don't have a traditional schedule, but
Mhm.
comparatively, but I think, people have different circadian rhythms, and I'm like, if you can complete your work, then what's the issue here? But hey, like I think there's flexibility and a different mindset for me. So let's talk about my favorite topic, and I say that jokingly, half jokingly, because it is a very touchy topic I've noticed with a lot of people is white privilege. There are
Mhm.
many folks that will even see these clips and be like, "Oh my God, like stop complaining," and all these things. Like, let's talk about that though. Like, what are your thoughts on that and how you've been able to kind of have conversations or discussions about addressing this privilege?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, and it comes along just all the time. And I sometimes think that individuals that have the white privilege aren't even aware of the privilege that they have. And sometimes, like as I told you before, me working with a lot of white executives, they may not realize the privilege until I actually call them out on it. And they see just through the scope of what I'm going through, and then in comparison of what they're going through, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know that. But sometimes, you know in the field that I've been working in, sometimes people will walk right past me and they'll just assume that I'm just there, randomly. Or do you know what you're doing? Or do you know what's going on? And it's like, well, here's my badge for one. So obviously I am authorized to be here. And for two, let's go ahead and get the executive so we can kind of talk this out a little bit more in detail on, what did give you the sense that I didn't belong here? How can we, work with you next time so that this doesn't happen here before? What do I need to do in order to help you to understand some of the things that are going on? And once again, this is San Francisco, so you do have a lot of more individuals that are progressive, but
Mm-hmm.
still you have a lot of people that come and they want to change the scope. They don't like the climate. They don't like to see a lot of people in color that are in leadership, or they may feel like, someone didn't know what they were doing before and they have to reshape things that are going on. And it's like we have to almost kind of go through with the data and the matrix. It's like, once again, you have to kind of prove to them that this is why that this is here, that this is why these things are in place. So once again, with the white privilege, I like to identify things in real time. And also too, like, let's have a conversation about this, because a lot of people sometimes they don't really know, because that's just their limited beliefs. That's all that they've been told. No one has actually been able to stop them and say anything different to them, because with this privilege, they just are able to just keep going. And it's almost like a snowball effect. And as the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger, so does their entitlement. So it's like as they start to roll off, while they're kind of just a small snowball, it's like, hey, this is how we've been doing things. This is how we're going to start doing things now, and just really having a team effect about it. I know one time I was able to call somebody out around different individuals. So it wasn't just my perception against theirs, it was different colleagues in the room, different people of color, and they were able to talk about how they felt about the situation as well too. So sometimes you almost have to, it's not like shattering their beliefs, but it's like you have to like talk to them so that they're really able to have empathy towards where you're coming from, and kind of saying, hey, I kind of understand where you're coming from, because this is what you're used to, or this is what your household brings out from you. But here, this is what it really is. And I think that I've had a good response with that so far. And even like with the diversity day, some individuals with white privilege, they're not even familiar with some of the acronyms, like with MLK.
Right.
And it's like, that is really troubling. And these are some of the people that are leading these Fortune 500 companies.
One thing that really troubles me is not necessarily the folks that are receptive to the discussion, but the ones that completely, gaslight you or are unaware of the situation, even when you bring it to their attention. And I think the struggle is, you mentioned working twice as hard, is that if we make that same mistake, if we don't do our work to a certain capacity, it's like all the crap just falls on us, right? And I noticed that as time goes on, more and more people fail forward, and have that privilege to fall back on. So, how do we as an organization or leaders really work to combat this double standard in terms of work expectations?
And I think that, you know, as leaders, if you have five leaders, there's always going to be those two that just are just going to just fight the system. So I think that this is just going to be something that unfortunately we will always have to deal with. It's not just going to go away. I think that the one thing about it is that if we can educate leaders through continuous learning, it's not just going to be that one class, that one episode where people are going to have that one aha moment. It just doesn't work that way. I think it needs to be continuous learning through HR. I think that leaders really need to partner with HR and they really need to develop something where it is enhanced quarterly, monthly, weekly, and you are able to highlight different individuals where they can spotlight how they have been treated in corporate America and where they are today. I think that a lot of my colleagues, when I was coming up in corporate America, they just assumed that I had a privilege because they were like, you're always able to land these awesome roles and people just really like you. And, how are you able to do that? And it's almost like, well, for one, it's not how, it's I am qualified for this job. I am qualified. There were no other candidates. There is nobody that's going to outwork Shauntel. That's just always been my mindset. When I come to a job, I feel like I own the job. Like this is my house. This is my home. I actually have a labor of love to work with other people. And it's not about the numbers. It's not about the matrix. It's about the people. I'm genuinely a people person. And when you see some people who take the time to learn about the people behind the titles and the work, that's when they do start to have a little bit of self-compassion. But nowadays, a lot of leaders, they don't have self-compassion. They're just driven by productivity. How can we make this work? They believe in clicks, and clicks are killers more than anything else. They're the most dangerous thing in the workplace. And sometimes, if you are on the hit list due to your color or due to your race or your gender, then it's going to be 12 times harder for you. I've seen individuals who we're trying to celebrate their birthday, and their birthday card just always gets lost every year.
Oh my gosh.
Their cake always gets melted or it never arrives on time or their gifts or it's just always something that's a hiccup with it. And it's like, no, we need to stop.
Isn't that symbolic? Like your cake melts, like seriously? No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the questions that popped up for me was, it's tiring. I mean, there's so much. It's a long game, as you mentioned. It's continual learning, continued advocacy. So how do you take care of yourself as you're going through this lifelong journey?
I take care of myself by just loving myself, by just always reminding myself that I'm doing this for the younger versions of me that are coming in and walking through the door. I do this for the individuals that are too old and too tired. And they're just like, hey, I'm going to let you do it because I haven't seen any change yet. And you have your young timers and your old timers. And it's like, I'm kind of like right there in between, but I do it for everybody. And I take care of myself by knowing that this fight is going to be a fight, not just only for me, but for the younger version of me and the older version of me. And I just have to do it. You just have to go in there. I want to make sure that I'm eating well, I'm taking care of myself well, and also too that I'm just really loving me. And there may be times when I may be a little bit tired, but like I said before, I still have to speak up. I have a good relationship with all of my executives before, and sometimes like they may just know like just by me giving them that look Like, or maybe they might be giving me just that look. And it's like, okay, what can we do? What can we do to press forward with this? So sometimes I would just fight in the boardroom. I would fight with the community board members by saying, hey, we have got to pass this. We have got to pass this law. We have got to pass this rule. We have got to pass this regulation. Now we have to start hiring people. And when we start to hire these people, let's start removing their names. Let's start removing their addresses. Let's start removing this. Let's start removing their race on there. These things have nothing to do with this. And so just kind of changing the scope on everything, fighting by how we do the orientations, fighting on how the break room is set up. I've not had to actually fight the people, it's more fighting the system. So if
Hmm.
we are able to fight and educate the system, then the people kind of have less leeway to get away with stuff.
Yeah, you're really talking about proactivity too, and just having that energy that you're diverting into these things because it is a very, very difficult thing to fight a system. So one of the things too is that there are some women of color who feel like I don't want to speak up because I'm so worried about not being liked by becoming perceived as this person with a chip on their shoulder. How do you combat that, or how did you combat that in the past?
That's an excellent question. One of the things is that I was the executive assistant for the hospital president. And so there was a lot of people who didn't want to speak up. So they would come to me so that I could speak up for them. And a lot of the times, by me being that sounding board, I would just tell them, like, you are not going to lose your job by you speaking up. We will make sure that you are not retaliated against by speaking up. Now that you have come here, we're going to make sure that you are able to get this voiced out and we are able to help you within real time. That's the one thing I always wanted to do was in real time. Sometimes I might have planned on leaving work at 4 o'clock, but I would work with certain executives and I may not leave till 7 o'clock. But I know that the next day when I came back, everything would be resolved. And I think that we all have to have someone who we do champion in. I know that there's a lot of jobs where you have unions and your union rep is supposed to speak up for you, but a lot of people don't feel safe within those places as well either. I think that every place you should have at least somebody who you are able to talk to because you may not want to voice your opinion yourself, but you can pass that knowledge off to somebody else and they can voice it on a higher platform so that that does still get out there in the ecosystem and someone still does put that out there for you. We want to be able to get things resolved because the thing about it is that if we say nothing, someone will come in and they'll get it 2 times, 3 times more harder than you received it.
Mm.
And then the thing about it is that a lot of jobs, they don't have mental health days. So when you are really going through something, you can't just make that call and say, hey, I need a mental health day. You still have to come in. And then when you haven't been able to voice your opinion and now you're in this toxic environment, now it almost is perceived that you're the problem.
Hmm.
Oh, you have an
Absolutely.
attitude and now you're upset and now this. And so it almost is the optics that, what the other people were saying or what they were doing. Now they're innocent. Now they're the victims. Now they're the victims and now they need help and we need to do something to help them. But really, they're the ones that's setting the fire to it. So you have to almost just take a deep breath. I've been in so many situations where I was nervous, my hands were sweating, but I felt like if I didn't do it, and I'm a big sister. So I always would say, if I don't do it, then who else is going to do it for my little sister?
Hmm.
Nobody. So I have to go in there and I have to do it. And I would always try to make my case towards where it's not like I'm just bringing someone like a problem or issue. I would always come with at least 3 solutions, at least three.
Mm.
Say, hey, here's the issue, and here are the things that we can do A, B, and C. So if anybody out there is having some trouble with anything, think about at least three good key solutions on how you can get it rectified. If that's bringing in HR, if that's bringing in another type of rule, or if you're changing things, I love changing things. I love shaking things up because nothing can just stay the way it is forever. That's not realistic. So you have to change things up. And if you do change things up, you'll be like a forever goddess within the organization. Like, yeah, they were the ones that made this change. And now because of them, we have this now. So
So you heard it here. Aspire to be a forever goddess. I
Yeah.
think we need to make nameplates of that. That would be an amazing title. Well, you have so many words of wisdom, and thank you so much for sharing it. Where can people learn more about your work and connect with you?
Definitely, yes. You can learn more about me on wishingyouwellinlife.org. And definitely on there, you can send me emails and you can learn more about how I do love to be innovative in workplaces. And what I do is really a labor of love. I'm just here to change organizations, one executive, one department at a time. And I know that it can be like that. Work shouldn't have to be so hard and so strenuous, especially for people of color. I see so many people coming into work and they just have their heads held down, and I just want to do something different. Some people say you're like a motivational speaker, but really I think of it more as inspiration because sometimes I need motivation just to do my laundry or to wash out my car. But I think that it's the inspiration that lasts even longer. And it's something that you can really hold on to and you can take it a lot further because in this world, we don't see things as they are. We really do see things as we are. And we have to be the change. We have to be that. And so within the space that I curate, I want to curate that love for everybody and not point the fingers at anybody. Nobody's wrong. Nobody's right. We're just all in this together and let's work this out together. And I think that that's a beautiful thing.
Shauntel, thank you, our forever goddess. We appreciate so much that you are on the show, and I am so grateful to you.
Thank you so much. You're amazing. Thank you, Dr. Wong.
Thank you for listening. We would love for you to subscribe to the podcast and join our community on all our socials at colorsuccesspodcast.com. Looking forward to you checking out my memoir, Cancel the Filter: Realities of a Psychologist, Podcaster, and Working Mother of Color on Amazon and wherever books are sold. I'd love to hear your Cancel the Filter moments.